once again, friend of the show, Jacob Silverman, co-author of Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, host of the Naked Emperor podcast, and writer at places like The Nation and our very own AM Quickie, which you should be checking out if you haven't already. Jacob, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
I've been curious about this OpenAI story, and I was trying to read, like Wall Street Journal articles, CNBC. And, I mean, I was not really able to make heads or tails of it until I read your piece in The Nation on this front. So there's been some drama with this company, OpenAI, over the past week. And let's just get our viewers up to speed, or listeners here, with the most basic questions to start. What is OpenAI and who is Sam Altman?
Sure. There are maybe a half dozen major AI startups. Of course, there are a lot of others, but ones that are valued in the tens of billions of dollars. And OpenAI is the biggest and the most important. And Sam Altman is the CEO and co-founder of OpenAI. He is very popular in Silicon Valley. I think there's actually an interesting kind of social or networking aspect here. He used to be the head of something called Y Combinator, which is the most desired startup incubator in Silicon Valley. If you have a new company, you want to get into Y Combinator to get access to money and connections and things like that. So Sam Altman basically knows every money person in Silicon Valley, and a lot of them like him. He's not necessarily a scientist. He's more of a manager and a money guy. And he was summarily fired from OpenAI, which is valued at more than $80 billion, on Friday. It was just a really sudden kind of firing, where this kind of situation where people thought everything was going well. This is the hottest startup basically in the world. They have a lot of money from Microsoft, and Microsoft definitely plays a role here. And he was suddenly fired. There's a huge uproar, especially from all of his allies in the tech industry and most of OpenAI's employees. It seemed like maybe he would come back, then maybe he was going to go to Microsoft, then maybe the whole company was going to follow him to Microsoft. And now he's back again, it seems, and he's once again CEO of OpenAI, but some of his rivals apparently have been forced to leave.
This is a really interesting dynamic here, because the structure of OpenAI is different than, I would say, a standard startup, right? And it appears like the employees of OpenAI were really aligned with Altman. The investors, like Microsoft, which has invested $13 billion into OpenAI, were quite aligned with Altman as well, and they wanted him to stick around. But the board is the one that forced Altman out in this instance. Jacob, what makes that kind of significant, and why? How is this dynamic pretty drastically different from other Silicon Valley companies of its type?
It's a strange company. You might see this flowchart going around online, where OpenAI is technically in some ways a nonprofit. There is sort of a for-profit entity at the heart of this that is developing a lot of what we think of as ChatGPT and the OpenAI products. They are actually capped at how much money they can make or how much profit they can make. That's what Microsoft is investing in, and that's the real heart of the company. But then you have these affiliate or sort of overseeing nonprofit elements. And that is where the real clash seemed to be occurring last week and over the weekend, which is that there are some people who are more committed to the nonprofit interests of OpenAI because they think this is a way to develop this technology, but also to contain it, because we have to acknowledge that there is an almost religious faith at OpenAI and in some parts of the AI world that they are inventing something that's going to be potentially smarter than a human being, artificial general intelligence, as they call it. This is going to change the world, and if they're not careful, it could destroy the world. Pardon me. So that nonprofit kind of wrapper, which has a lot of legal ramifications, is supposed to ensure that OpenAI pursues all this kind of fundamental research, but and creates a nuclear bomb but doesn't set it off. Basically, that's the kind of knife edge dynamic we're really working with here. And from what we understand, I mean, still we're very heavy on gossip but light on reporting with this story.
Yes,
but which I still have some questions about, like what might have actually happened there. But it seems like Altman and some of his allies, which, as you said, are definitely everyone with the money, really want to push forward. They want to see how far they can take this stuff, keep innovating with ChatGPT, keep rolling out new products to customers, and they hope that one day they will kind of create God in a box, as some people sometimes say. There are other people at OpenAI who seem just as much committed to kind of, frankly, the religious or cultish vision of AGI and AI, and they really think they're working on the most important thing in the world. There's nothing more important than this, not climate change, not anything. But they want to pursue it kind of a different way with a little more caution, perhaps. And as you said, I think what we found really here at the end of this coup and then counter coup is that the people with the money got their way. And I think Microsoft emerged also a little more powerful and a little more controlling of what OpenAI is going to be, as they would want it to be, because Microsoft has committed $13 billion to OpenAI. One last note I think we should say is that these kinds of companies, while some of them aspire towards more altruistic or nonprofit aims, it's incredibly expensive to run a company like this. I mean, Microsoft committed $13 billion because you need almost unlimited amounts of compute, as they call it, basically data center time, GPUs, the actual data, the talent who you pay so much for, Sam Altman and his employees. So it's very hard to actually do this in a committed nonprofit way. Eventually, you're going to need one of these trillion-dollar companies like Microsoft to start paying the bills.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you've sent me a joke over IM. Say it on air.
Oh, I said the true test of AI is, can it make people use Bing search?
Right. Then it will be all powerful like God.
Very much so.
But so it's really interesting to how Microsoft is kind of continuing the vision of its founder in making sure that certain things that are more open sourced are privatized and enclosed by a company like Microsoft. But just putting that to the side for 1 second, I want to return to the board and their concerns. What their concerns reportedly are, because leftists, I think, are concerned that AI is going to supplant much of the labor force, or at least be used as an excuse to lay off many, many people who have honed certain skills that will be deemed redundant by a capitalist class, where they can cost save and implement AI instead. That's definitely my primary concern. My sense is that that is not the concern of the board of OpenAI.
Yeah, I think that the concern, or the level of concern at which they're operating, is really, are we going to create God, and is God going to kill us all? You know, it's really this very far-flung, prophetic, almost eschatological end-of-world vision that they're debating and worried about. Some of this stuff does come out of the world of effective altruism, the kind of Sam Bankman-Fried FTX philosophy.
Oh, good.
Which we don't need to revisit, but even just those associations should say a lot. But as I mentioned in my Nation article, I think the problems with AI are much more immediate, and some of them are here right now. We don't really need to get off on a tangent, but there are also different ways to define what AI is. But I would just say quickly, we already have autonomous systems or automated systems that are telling humans what to do, whether you're in an Amazon factory or you work at a call center. There are already ways in which this stuff is being folded into everyday processes. If you actually call a call center or calls customer support somewhere, there might be an automated system that actually analyzes your voice to determine how much of a problem you're going to be and what level of service you should get. Like they analyze how annoyed you sound. So there are all these little ways. I mean, and we could talk about credit scores, or there are so many ways in which automated systems, some of which may fall under the mantle of AI, are being integrated into our lives, the economy, consumer life, the military, of course. And I think the more immediate questions are, what are we doing with these systems right now, and how are they being foisted upon people, especially lower income people and gig workers and folks like that? That's really the problem, is that AI is not becomes all powerful. It's that it's deemed good enough by some of these big corporate players to then be folded into their systems, because they can say, oh, it's good enough, we'll save some money. And then the problems, of course, trickle down to labor and to consumers.
Yeah, and so how did Altman return then, right? I mean, so they were concerned he was moving too quickly. There are some allusions, as you write in your piece, to maybe him being a bit duplicitous and hiding certain things from the board because he's much more focused on the profit motive that's, I'm sure, like being pushed by Microsoft, which he's very close with, their chief, primary investor here, or biggest investor, right? Yeah. So, how did they get turned around? Was it just the force of the money?
It may be that. I mean, I think some of this will become clear in the coming days, but when you have those sort of this esoteric philosophical kind of argument versus, hey, we're the leaders of this technology, and if we keep pushing, we can do some really amazing things and make more money. The latter is a lot more clear, I think, justification to folks in Silicon Valley. I think what clearly mattered a lot was that the employees at OpenAI seemed to like Sam Altman and trust him and want to follow him. And they all basically had blank check jobs waiting for them either at Microsoft or Salesforce, and other companies started emerging saying, we'll hire you too. So it mattered a lot that Sam Altman seems to be synonymous with OpenAI. But I think what you're saying about the board is important and has in a lot of ways been overlooked. I mean, some people are talking about this, but it's not a small matter for a board, even if they're motivated by perhaps principles we don't understand, to fire their CEO and to fire a very popular CEO. They released statements saying that Sam, quote, wasn't candid with them. And there was another statement later when they stood by their decision. Of course, the board has now been mostly replaced except for one person. But that indicates to me that something happened. It doesn't mean it's the most the worst scandal you've ever heard, but some kind of malfeasance or breaking of rules or procedures. There was some reporting that Sam Altman was traveling a lot in the Middle East and other places, trying to raise money from sovereign wealth funds, I assume in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and from Masayoshi Son, the head of SoftBank, who's known for giving out billions of dollars to people like Adam Newman, and WeWork. And supposedly, Sam Altman had interest both in making some kind of AI piece of hardware with Johnny Ive, the legendary former Apple designer. We never really learned what that was. And then his other intended business was to create a chip startup that would compete with NVIDIA and some of the other companies making GPUs and other chips for AI. Now, just real quick, I actually think that is really crazy and kind of reckless because you don't just create a new chip company that's going to challenge the biggest chip company in the world, arguably, which is NVIDIA, which is doing unbelievably well and is essential to the AI industry. This takes tens of billions of dollars in startup capital. You need brilliant scientists who can actually innovate on this stuff. You need production capacity. You need like 10 years to even get stuff to built and then to customers. So what I think it says, and that is something that I think a board might be concerned about. Hey, you're talking about launching this colossal startup that would compete, that doesn't seem to have a good chance and not really focused here at home. That, to me at least, if I were a board member, which I'm far from it, would raise a lot of questions like, why are you doing this kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, it also just appears to be a continuation of and you say this, I think, in the piece as well, the move fast and break things ideology of Silicon Valley, which is like, we are gonna gobble up as much capital, as much investment as humanly possible. We're gonna skirt as many regulations as we can. We're gonna implement our new technology. And then the law, the structures, they'll fall in place afterwards. But first, we've just got to get to this level of prominence. And I think that's also fascinating to me in terms of, like, was he seeking out investment for that project instead of really focusing in on OpenAI? I mean, we don't know at this point, but what is the need for more investment in something like OpenAI? My guess would be the more valuable use of someone's time in that way would be to start capturing information for AI to learn from, right? Like, there's going to be issues with copyright and with intellectual property that is being completely cast aside due to the move fast and break things philosophy. Yes. What is the status of that in this OpenAI story?
Yeah, I think there's a feeling that perhaps some of the bills will come due later. As you said, the move fast and break things ethos, which was popularized by Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, but we certainly saw it with Uber or Amazon. Basically, Theranos breaking or ignoring laws or regulations or conveniently sidestepping them, and then kind of either not asking for forgiveness or just reaching some kind of settlement later. So one of those things might be lawsuits over the unbelievable amounts of data, a lot of also copyright information that have gone into OpenAI's models and other companies' models, because they need just these incredible, huge corpuses of data, like everything that's ever been written in the history of humanity, in order to train this stuff. And they will make their own arguments for why they should have some right to this as just training data, but they are using a form of other people's labor or work product. So I think that kind of thing could lead to huge lawsuits later. But really, a lot of it also does come back to just lavishing unbelievable amounts of money on the talent, and then on the hardware and the data centers and the compute time. I mean, one of the things that Microsoft did to sort of both become an investor in OpenAI and to perhaps right the ship and get Sam Altman back in there was they offer a lot of computation resources because it's needed. So, and that's why you only have a few of these big AI companies likely to move forward. And that again gets us back to this fundamental contradiction. Like, how can you have this sort of be a public serving or altruistic or even nonprofit kind of entity when it's clearly just this unbelievable consumer of capital and resources?
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like the vision, the almost religious vision that you describe from the employees and even from the board or whatever is meant to paper over those very facts there. And it's a lot easier to operate in an unethical way when you think that you're creating like God via computing. And that's
what could be a higher goal than that? You know?
Yeah.
Jacob, do you have any sense of, is the AI bubble softening? Is the bullishness disappearing? Because I think people do. There was all this talk like a year ago about how this is going to be exponentially improving. So you think it's good now? Well, actually, a year from now, it's just going to be even better. But you actually look at what it takes to even produce what it's producing now, which is a tremendous amount of computing. What's your sense of the bullishness for AI?
I think certainly the people with the money, VCs and sovereign wealth funds and some of these companies are still very excited. But I think outside analysts and even just some everyday observers, like, I'm curious how many people actually use AI in their lives, like as a productivity tool. We hear about sometimes, frankly, I know some people in finance who use different versions of kind of boutique LLMs, those are the large language models, to look at stuff. Or I've talked to programmers who you can have OpenAI or other AI programs just create some kind of generic code for you, and you still have to proofread it. But given how the lack of exponential improvement and the huge amount of hallucinations, as they call them, the just false information, I don't really see how people can rely on this stuff as a work or productivity tool. So the initial wave of hype was so huge, and they might cite user numbers, but I also wonder how many of those people are actually using it as anything more than an idle entertainment that they log into once in a while or make a funny meme out of.
Yeah.
And so while I would say that AI probably has more use cases than crypto, our last form of mega tech hype, and I see why some of the enthusiasm is there, there's still a point soon, I think, where they're going to have to follow through on some of these utopian promises, or at least show that like this stuff has an obvious and appealing use case that can be spread widely and that can scale in the way that they imagine. Right now, I think there's a lot of excitement sort of about the novelty of the technology, but still not really that fundamental implementation without the hallucinations.
Lastly, Jacob, before we let you go, can't have you on the show without asking about your thoughts about the Binance CEO. Basically, what 50 is it 50 million or 50 billion that he has to pay? Or I don't have the exact article in front of me, but he got convicted of those money laundering. So what's going on there?
CZ, also known as Changpeng Zhao, but most people call him CZ, the co-founder and CEO of Binance. I mean, this was the white whale of crypto, basically. For people who follow, this is as big as SBF being arrested. In some ways, it's less dramatic. We knew that his company, Binance, had been negotiating with U.S. law enforcement and regulators for a while. The company is going to pay a fine of more than $4 billion. I think his personal fine is about $50 million Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a lot more than that squirreled away somewhere. He came to the US. He came to federal court in Seattle. I never thought I'd see him come to the US, frankly, because of the criminal cloud hanging over him. But he came to court, he pleaded guilty, and really it's to make all this go away. There are a lot of problems if you try to pursue this to its ultimate conclusion. Binance is mostly overseas. CZ is a Canadian citizen with Chinese ties. It's just a complicated situation. But this is the biggest crypto exchange in the world. And it's been kneecapped, basically, to put it bluntly. I don't think it'll collapse overnight, but their ability to do business anywhere near the US or with dollars is going to be severely hampered. So CZ might have a short prison term. Some people might think he got off a little lightly, but this is a fundamental change for Binance and for the enforcement against crypto. It's just not going to look the same after this.
All right, can we anticipate some more writing from you or some episodes of Naked Emperor podcast where people can hear more about this?
I hope so. I can't let go of these guys. I love these characters, and there are other people like Justin Sun or the Tether guys, or maybe something on CZ, or there's going to be Sam Bankman-Fried another trial in March, probably over this bribery charge. So I can't get away from it.
His parents too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think besides them getting sued, if you look at the lawsuit against them from FTX, there is stuff in there that I think criminal investigators are looking at. So this is far from over.
Well, Jacob Silverman, if you want to read his book, co-authored with Ben McKenzie, Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, you definitely should. You can hear more about these kinds of topics. Jacob's, an expert on this. Listen to the Naked Emperor podcast and subscribe to the AM Quickie, where you can see some of Jacob's writing in our newsletter.
Great way to wake up.
Yeah, I love. It really is. It's like I read it, when I'm sitting on the subway or whatever. So I'm able to kind of have some good, a good baseline of news before I do all my reading before the show. So anyway, Jacob, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.